Okay, so I tried to upload a video and I spoke for like half an hour. I don't think it went up though because the camera I'm using is an old phone and it's kind of shit. But let's see if this works. So I'll pick up where I left off. I don't care. I don't think anyone's watching anyways. This is for me to practice. So we were talking about local peak illustrations and it is kind of cold. This is off topic. It's kind of cold because it's entering winter. So if I look all bundled up, it's because it's cold in here and it's morning. So about 7:30. So the problem with local peaks is that, or the problem, it's not the problem that they're local peaks, it's that we automatically strive for progress. And so if there's local peaks around and you just look at progress, you'll eventually just get stuck at a local peak. Whereas if you had gone or tried to scale a peak that was next to you, would have gotten a lot higher. So it's limiting because you're blind to it, and that's the problem. So if the only way to really fix this problem is if you could correctly see and notice proper progress. So you want to get to the highest altitude, but in this analogy it's kind of foggy and you can't figure out if you're at the highest peak. So if you see something that you like, it's pretty easy to know what you don't want. And so if you're trying to scale a peak and there's a lot of vermin and it's nasty and you see stuff that you don't want, then it's easy to get off it. The problem is when there's something that isn't very pleasant, but you think that every peak has to have that or is going to have that, so you suck it up and you deal with it. Whereas if you had gone to another peak, you wouldn't have had to deal with pesky vermin or pesky mosquitoes. And so the wrong thing about standards is that when you have a standard, you don't really have an objective view of stuff, because standards get made through our subconsciousness, through our environment, through the people around us. So we don't get a really good picture between the difference between good, bad, better, worse, and just okay. So that's the problem with standards. So we can't judge things based on I'm kind of going off track, but if we want to figure out what objectively is best, we can't go with our standards because our standards may not be correct. Now, a lot of stuff in life, you're going to default to standards, and as you walk and as you progress and as you move through life, you're going to have standards. But when you're sitting down to think about it and consciously get involved, standards are something that you don't want to take a look at because we automatically do it. That's basically how we are happy, or how we feel about certain things, is because we measure it against our own standards. Now, and it's a big topic too, because ironically the lower standards that you have doesn't necessarily mean the happier you'll be, because you get into a perpetual motion where you go on a downward spiral because you constantly don't meet your standards, so you go lower and you go lower and you go lower. Or you set your standards just high enough where you don't think you can reach it and you do reach it, and you just progress from there. Progress. So in your mind, there should never be bad, because what bad is, or this bad feeling that you get, is a contradiction in your mind. So, and if you do this, if you have bad in your mind, it's an anomaly. And what you can do with it is that there will be threads of contradictions that you can start trying to pull and try and start getting to the root. And you'll soon unravel it if you start picking. If there's any bad in your, if you're feeling bad and you actually get consciously involved and start picking at the threads and the core and figuring out the essence of it, it's a contradiction that you can dissolve. But a lot of people actually see and accept bad without realizing. Because and they've just gotten into a habit where they accept it. Now, if you see it clearly, it should dissolve. If you label it correctly, we have a weird thing where labeling an emotion actually dissolves the emotion for whatever reason. And you can't label it for other people, you have to do it internally. So if you notice that you're getting mad, label it. Label, okay, I know I'm mad. Or I feel really mad because of this. And once you do that, it'll help dissolve your feelings. And it might help if you do it for other people, but it's not as strong. So you act on what you know because your mind is made to deal with gray areas. But it's your job to clearly cut off what's wrong or right, what's black and white, and to consciously get involved and know what you're dealing with. Because to your mind, things are pretty much arbitrary. Your mind can't figure out what's good or bad. It only has a software in it that progresses and calculates things. And it can't actually, and your mind only wants to see progress, but it can't check to see if the program that's running in your mind is correct and that the progress that you want to see is the one that you actually want to get. And so it's your job to get consciously involved to do those checks. So embrace the gray, because the opposite doesn't make sense, because there's a lot of gray areas, a lot of life there. In life, almost everything is gray and white in terms of what you're dealing with, because if it's black or white, there's not even a question. Like, it's not a gray area if I should go over to my neighbors and steal their bike, because that's so clearly obviously wrong. I don't even have to think about it. But when you start getting closer to the gray areas, there are things that when you think about can be either black or white. And it's your job to figure those out. And with the rest, that's the gray area, you embrace it. But you don't double down on it. You don't get better at navigating in something that you don't know the answer to. You double down on trying to figure out what's black or white, because you know. Like you double down on what you know, basically. And that's also the basis of your foothold for getting started in something. You start with what you know and you build from there. You get rid of what's clearly wrong, and you kind of operate in the gray area until you can trim down that gray area into a smaller percentage so you can act better. So, for example, you date around to figure out what you want, and it's really for the relationship. And it's not like the sense that you're protecting the relationship, or it's only the relationship, and it's not that the relationship is more important than the both of you, because happiness comes into play, your emotions, but it is a collaboration to get to the peak relationship. So gray is gray, and if you want to know more, you start with the little you know. And the bottleneck is always epistemology, which is knowing what is true, or knowing how you know, knowing how to know if something is true or not. How do you know when you are accurately determining black and white, and when you are seeing it to see/determine progress. So let me read that again. How do you know when you are accurately determining black or white and when you are seeing it to determine progress? If you want your mind to see what's productive to get where you want to go, you want to start with the extremes and chisel away. So, and I think this is an example for relationships again, but you focus on what the other person, or you focus on understanding the other person. And so you want to see or you want to feel the good that they get with the actions they take. And this is just relationships in general. And so in sales, what you want is you want to get people, you want to offer people a way to get to a higher place than where they are now. Whether it's emotionally in their business, life, you basically have a product or a service that can take them there. But make sure you avoid a product or a service or something that where they have to go down through a valley before they get to the higher peak. You don't want to sell that. You want to sell something that is slightly higher on the same peak that they are in, that they can imagine getting there easily without having to change their mindset and so on. So epistemology, if you know, means epistemology is the philosophy of knowing what's true. And if you get down to it correctly, if you know something is true, it means you don't have to know if something is wrong. In that little saying there. But anything that can take you out, meaning if you try and attempt something and it kills you, you want to generally avoid it. Take a different route or have a different approach where it won't kill you. This is like in sales. Salespeople learn how to basically kind of stick their neck out a little bit, ask for the sale without killing the sale, because a lot of times people just aren't ready. And so, but some people are. So if they are ready, you stick your neck out a little bit in a way that you won't get killed. It's non-threatening, it's not pushy. And if they want to go for it, then they'll take that route. But if not, everything's fine. Let's talk a little bit more. And so you haven't destroyed your chances of talking to them and trying to help them through that. So if you're weighing evidence, like the science and the facts, for example, if you always say, I let the evidence take me where it takes me, you're not slicing away black and white parts. The scientific method is good in operating in gray areas, but it doesn't give you black or white because you're gathering data. You have to use it to guess, first of all, and your guess is a certain percentage wrong or right. It's like my guess, my hypothesis, my scientific method led me to this theory, which is 95% correct, or has a 95% possibility of being correct. So use it to guess in the absence of things. But if it is a scientific method, if you're using evidence-based approach, you have to know that it's just a guess, so there's a possibility that it's wrong. So if you use extremes to shave off black or white, you can get a lot more narrower, and you know not to do the black or white stuff. So the main question in life is figure out a way of seeing or noticing actual progress instead of paying attention of going up. That's the local peak theory. You don't want to get stuck on a local peak. You want to get to the highest altitude possible regardless. And no, not regardless, but you want to get to the highest altitude without because you don't want to go through trial and error, because in our life that's the slowest way of learning, and there's so many other things in life that you don't learn by trial and error. You learn through other ways. For example, you don't learn through trial and error not to cross the street without looking. You learn that. And so the more you see black or white about progress, like you definitely do this thing, you definitely don't do this when you want to make actual progress, you narrow it down and you learn to identify that you're not on the right peak, or that you are until proven otherwise. So that's the end of that. Hopefully this one uploads to YouTube.